I'm a 32-year-old woman, and the oldest child in a family where being a woman means nothing unless you're cleaning up after the men. I grew up in a small town where last names still get whispered with either respect or resentment. My father's name? Very much the former. He ran a general goods store on Main Street for over 30 years. It was the kind of place where old men played cards in the back room while kids bought candy up front. He was proud of it, proud enough to treat it like a legacy instead of a business. He owned 3 properties, the storefront building that housed his shop, our family home a few blocks away, and a lakeside cabin about 20 minutes outside town. He liked to brag about that one the most, as if owning a cabin made him a king. I'm the firstborn. My brother Miles came along 2 years later, and from the moment he could walk, my dad treated him like the heir to a non-existent throne. I was just the backup help, the assistant, the girl. It wasn't like I gave them any reason to treat me like less. I wasn't wild, no drama. Straight A's, part-time work at the shop, always home before curfew. When I was 24, I had a full-time job and savings. I asked Dad if he'd consider letting me buy the store from him so he could retire. He laughed so hard I thought he might choke. That's a man's job, he said. Like that ended the conversation. A year later, I watched him write a check for Miles' second round of college tuition. Miles had already failed out once. He blamed the professors, of course, said they didn't get him. Dad nodded along like that made sense. Meanwhile, when I applied for a small loan to buy a condo in the city and asked Dad to co-sign, he refused flat out. Bad investment, he said. You'll get married and move anyway. I didn't. I stayed in the city. Put myself through a business degree. Ended up managing properties for a commercial real estate firm. It was stable work and decent money, and I kept my head down. Then our mom died. It was sudden. A stroke. I got the call from the hospital and drove back to town the same day. Miles didn't even show up until the next evening. I planned the entire funeral, casket, service, paperwork, food, everything. Miles complained the whole time about how exhausting it was. After the funeral, I noticed something strange. Dad started getting even colder toward me. One afternoon, I saw him meet with a man outside the shop and hand him a folder. He didn't say what it was. I didn't ask. I figured it was tax stuff or refinancing. Nothing urgent. Turns out it was much worse. What I didn't know at the time was that my dad had already made major changes to his will. Not just plans for after his death. He'd already transferred ownership of the cabin and the storefront building to Miles while still alive. Quietly. No announcements, no conversations, just paperwork done behind closed doors. The only property left in his name was the family house. He didn't will it equally to us. He didn't even name me. The document said the house would go to whichever child assumed responsibility for elder care, meaning Miles, who moved in a month after Mom died and started using the guest room while I was still back in the city working. I didn't find any of this out until after Dad passed away 2 years later. I got a text from Miles that just said, "Dad's gone." I handled everything. No funeral notice. No request to come home. No contact from a lawyer. Just that. I drove down anyway and showed up at the house. Miles answered the door like I was a neighbor selling cookies. Said the lawyer already read the will and that everything's taken care of. I asked for a copy. He said I'd have to talk to the estate attorney. I did. She was hesitant, but legally obligated to send it. When I got the envelope a week later, I sat in my apartment and read it 3 times. My name wasn't in it. Not once. No mention of shared assets. No division. No acknowledgement. The storefront and cabin were no longer part of the estate. They were already under Miles' name. As for the house, the language was vague, but specific enough that I'd never have a claim. I pulled out a folder from my desk drawer where I'd kept old receipts. One of them showed I had paid for my dad's medical aid when he broke his hip. Twice. Miles had never visited the hospital, let alone paid for anything. I remembered something then. Mom used to keep a lockbox in the attic labeled personal, lease letters. It had a cabin sketch taped to the front. That night, I packed a bag and drove to town. Miles was out of state for a weekend trip, according to his social media. The house key still worked. I crept into the attic with a flashlight. The lockbox was gone, but I found the key to it, still tucked in the back of Mom's sewing desk drawer, like she meant for someone to come looking. And I did, because if they weren't going to give me what was mine, I was going to take it back, piece by piece. I called the estate lawyer the day after I got back to the city. Her tone was stiff, like she already knew what I was going to ask for. I asked for a full copy of my father's will. She hesitated, said it had already been settled. I told her I wanted the documentation for my own records. After a pause, she agreed. Legally, she had to. The package came 3 days later. I opened it at my kitchen counter and read it cover to cover, then again, then once more for good measure. There wasn't a single sentence in the will that mentioned me. Not my name, not a vague reference to children or descendants. Just Miles. His name came up 11 times. Mine, 0. I cross-checked the property details listed. The storefront building and the cabin weren't even part of the estate. They'd been transferred 4 years earlier through living gifts, which meant Dad had moved ownership to Miles while he was still alive, before Mom died, before any of us knew what he was planning. That's why there was no probate process. There was barely an estate left to distribute. The house was the only thing in his name when he died. The will said it would pass to the child who assumed long-term responsibility for elder care. That was Miles on paper. In reality, he showed up twice a week, dropped off groceries, and left. I had receipts proving I paid for a medical home assistant when Dad broke his hip. Twice. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled the folder I kept with copies of every transaction. Bank statements, invoices from the care agency, payment confirmations. I called the agency and requested formal receipts. They emailed me within the hour. Then I remembered the joint account Mom used to manage. She used it to pay bills for the house and the cabin. I called the bank and gave them her name. The woman on the phone told me the account had been closed 2 months before Dad's death, and all remaining funds had been transferred to a sole beneficiary, Miles. That's when I thought of the lockbox. The one Mom kept in the attic, labeled in her handwriting, personal, lease letters. I hadn't seen it since before her death. I remembered it because she once caught me trying to open it when I was 16. She said, "That's for when I'm gone, not before." I checked Miles' social media and saw he was in Florida for the week with his girlfriend. I drove back to town that night, let myself into the house using my old key, and went straight to the attic. The lockbox was gone. The shelf where it used to sit had dust outlines from where something rectangular had been removed. I searched the sewing desk in Mom's room. The third drawer had a false bottom. Tucked inside was the small brass key to the box. I didn't waste time. I drove to the commercial building next. I hadn't been inside in years, but I knew the place well. The office in the back used to be where Dad handled all his files. I figured if the lockbox was gone, there was still a chance he left something behind. I texted an old friend from town, a locksmith who owed me a favor. He met me out back, and we let ourselves in through the side door. The office lock had been broken long ago, and no one had fixed it. Inside, it smelled like old paper and mildew. I opened the filing cabinet next to the desk. The bottom drawer was packed with folders. One was labeled Mortgage Refinance, Cabin. Another Lease Agreement 2003. I opened the lease file first. Inside was a document with my name on it, dated when I was 18. It listed me as co-owner of the cabin alongside my father. There were 2 signatures, his and mine. I vaguely remembered signing something back then. He told me it was a rental agreement, that it was just a formality so I could help manage it during the summers. I didn't question it. I was young, and he was my dad. Tucked behind the lease was another document, dated 3 years later, showing the title had been amended to remove my name. I had never signed anything else. No consent form, no transfer. I pulled every file that looked important, lease, mortgage records, tax forms, and laid them out on the desk. I used my phone to take photos of each page, then put them all in a fresh manila folder and slid them into my bag. Before leaving, I checked the top drawer and found an envelope with the property tax statements for the past 5 years. All had been mailed to Dad, not Miles, meaning Dad was still handling payments on paper, even though the title was under Miles' name. Another layer of confusion. I turned off the office lights, reset the locks, and locked the door behind me. Back in the car, I reviewed the photos. I had my lease. I had financial records. I had receipts. The will was airtight in cutting me out, but the rest? That wasn't just unfair. It might have been illegal. And if that lockbox was gone, then Miles knew exactly what he was hiding. I reached out to a real estate contact I knew from the city. He wasn't from my hometown, didn't know anyone connected to Miles, and owed me a favor from a deal I helped him close last year. We met at a diner outside city limits. I brought a folder with the lease agreement, the title amendments, my payment receipts for the medical aid, and photos from the commercial building. He flipped through the lease and paused at the subletting clause. It said any leasing or subleasing of the cabin required written consent from all registered owners. My name was on the original lease as co-owner. My signature wasn't on anything else. Legally, you've got a shot, he said. Worst case, it's leverage. Best case, you walk away with half or more. We looked up the cabin listing together. It was live on Airbnb under Miles' girlfriend's name. Photos showed fresh renovations, new furniture, and family antiques I hadn't seen in years. I recognized my mom's cedar chest sitting under the window, and a landscape painting that used to hang in my grandmother's hallway. I booked a one-night stay using a fake name and a burner email. The listing used a digital keypad for entry. Brand name was listed right in the instructions. I wrote it down. When I arrived, the girlfriend wasn't there. I did a walkthrough and noted a few things. The cedar chest had a dent in the corner. The tile in the guest bathroom was cracked. The HVAC unit was new but had an exposed wire. Nothing huge, but enough to document. That night, I called a locksmith who specialized in digital locks. I told him it was my property, gave him the brand, and paid for an off-the-record reset. We scheduled the job for that weekend, when the cabin was supposed to be empty. I returned early Saturday morning. There were no cars in the driveway. I parked a few blocks away, walked through the woods behind the cabin, and entered through the back door using the new code. Inside, everything was quiet. I started with the living room. I took wide-angle photos of each wall, every antique, and all the furnishings. I opened drawers and photographed anything that looked like mail or rental instructions. There was a locked cabinet under the stairs labeled owner use only. I left it alone for now. In the hallway closet, I found an old trunk filled with linens, and underneath them, a few of my mother's framed prints. They were wrapped in bubble wrap like someone had planned to ship them. I boxed up everything that belonged to my family. The cedar chest, the painting, my grandmother's dining set, still intact in the storage room. I loaded it all into my car, wrapped in towels, and drove it to a storage unit I had rented in the city the day before. I printed a plain white notice and taped it to the inside of the cabin door before I left. It said, "Notice of title review, this property is currently under dispute. All rental activity is suspended pending legal resolution." The next morning, Miles called. I didn't pick up. 10 minutes later, he emailed with the subject line legal notice. It was 2 paragraphs of threats and vague accusations, claiming I had broken in and stolen personal items. I forwarded it to my contact. He read it and replied in one line, "Empty threats. Zero legal weight." Next, I went back to the commercial building. My key still worked. The storefront had new signage, but nothing else had changed. I headed upstairs to the old apartment where we used to live before moving to the family house. It was being used for storage. My old twin bed frame was there, a bookshelf from my childhood bedroom, boxes with kitchenware labeled extra. I took everything that was mine, packed it up in the car. Before I left, I stopped at a hardware store and bought 2 new locks, one for the front door, one for the upstairs apartment. I changed them both, By now, I had a growing folder of proof, property records, financial receipts, photographs of illegal subletting, and evidence of co-ownership being ignored. My contact told me that if I wanted to file a formal claim, I had somewhere between 30 and 60 days before Miles could retaliate with a countersuit. I spent the next day organizing everything into folders, one for the cabin, one for the storefront, one for communications. I labeled each file, printed duplicates, and uploaded scans to a cloud drive. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, no scene, just quiet steps, locked doors, labeled boxes, photographs, and one line on a legal pad underlined twice, "Take back what's mine before he realizes I already have." I filed a quiet title action with the county clerk for the cabin. I attached the original lease agreement with my name listed as co-owner, along with sworn affidavits from 2 people who had been present during the signing, my mom's old friend and our former family attorney. Both were willing to give notarized statements confirming the lease had been explained to me as co-ownership, not just a rental helper agreement. I didn't tell Miles. I let the paperwork speak. A week later, his girlfriend found a county notice taped to the front door of the cabin by a sheriff's deputy. It announced the property was under legal dispute and that a hearing had been scheduled. That's how they found out. Later that day, her number lit up my phone. I didn't answer. She called again. I sent it to voicemail. Within the hour, she left a long message about how I was destroying their business. I deleted it without listening to the end. I hired a surveyor from out of county, someone with no ties to Miles or the family. He remapped the cabin lot and submitted the revised report to the clerk's office. The parcel now showed title in active dispute, pending co-ownership claim by petitioner. My name was in the system. 2 days later, Miles showed up at my apartment building. I saw him from the peephole, pacing in front of my door. He knocked once, then again. I stood still. He finally left after about 5 minutes. The next day, I received a letter in the mail, stamped and unsealed. Inside was a cease and desist notice from his lawyer. No supporting documents, no citations, just a demand to vacate any claim of ownership and cease contact with tenants or property. I forwarded it to my lawyer. She didn't even blink. My real estate contact introduced me to a probate specialist. We met for coffee with my growing stack of documents. She read the lease, the bank transfers, the photos, the title report, and the rental listings. Her response, this wasn't sloppy paperwork. This was done on purpose. We went deeper. We pulled the full transaction history on the commercial building. Turns out, Miles had refinanced it not once but twice in under 2 years. The most recent loan was $120,000, taken out last spring. It was already flagged as delinquent. I drove down to the property manager's office and asked for a tenant ledger. Of the 7 retail units, 4 were behind on rent, some by several months. 2 had bounced payments and had stopped hearing back from Miles altogether. I drafted letters and sent them out to every tenant by certified mail. The letter simply stated I was an interested party with legal standing in the building, and that they could contact me directly regarding lease renewals in the near future. 2 tenants reached out. One ran a vintage shop, the other a cafe. Both said they were tired of the lack of repairs and wanted out, but would consider staying if I took over. I kept their messages. I drove back to the property and walked through the alley to inspect the exterior. A pipe near the corner unit had burst and was leaking water along the base of the wall. I took a dozen photos. The damage was spreading into the foundation. My lawyer reviewed everything. She told me I had standing to file for constructive interest in the property, since Miles had failed to maintain it, pay property taxes on time, or properly manage the tenants. I filed the claim 2 days later. By the end of the month, the county clerk scheduled a preliminary hearing. Miles was given 21 days to respond. If he missed the deadline or failed to provide supporting documents, the court could move forward with partial forfeiture of the building. No shouting, no drama, just one filing after another, stacking up. Every time he blinked, I was already one move ahead. The week after I filed the quiet title and constructive interest claims, Miles left a message on my work landline. He called me a thief, said I was stealing his life. I downloaded the voicemail, saved it, and had a transcript made. My lawyer added it to our file. I drove back to the cabin that weekend to check on the place. There was now a security camera facing the driveway. It looked legit, black casing, blinking red light, but it was plastic. I checked the model. It was a decoy. No wiring, no recording. I had someone I trusted come with me and install a real camera inside. We hid it behind a ceiling fixture in the living room, angled toward the front entrance. I motion activated, stored everything on the cloud. I didn't keep any more antiques in my apartment. I packed up what I had already taken from the cabin, my mom's cedar chest, great-aunt's china, an old wall clock, and moved them to a secure storage unit downtown under my name. A few days later, I drove past the commercial building and saw a for sale by agent sign staked in the ground. The sign had a local phone number but wasn't on any real estate websites. No MLS listing. It looked rushed. I called the number. The agent answered. I introduced myself as someone doing due diligence on the title. She confirmed there were some issues. 2 active liens, one from a contractor, one from the county, and a litigation alert tied to the parcel number. I pulled a title report myself. Sure enough, my constructive interest filing had placed a cloud on the title. Any sale would require resolution of my claim first. The bank holding Miles' mortgage had already flagged the building as high risk. They were alerted when he missed another payment. Combined with the pending litigation, they had started sending letters. A week after I'd reported the leaking pipe to the county, a warning was issued. Building violation due to water damage, with 30 days to repair. Miles ignored it. The tenants didn't. 2 of them called me when a city inspector came by. I told them I wasn't officially the owner yet, but if the hearing went in my favor, repairs would happen fast. They seemed relieved someone was actually paying attention. One of the tenants forwarded me screenshots of texts from Miles. He had offered a rent discount in exchange for writing a false statement claiming I had harassed them. They declined. The messages were clear. Bribery attempt in writing. I printed the screenshots, along with the title report, violation warning, voicemail transcript, and MLS search results. I handed them all to my lawyer. She skimmed the packet and said, "He's digging his own hole." We filed for emergency injunctive relief, citing asset endangerment, tenant coercion, and active sabotage. The court granted it, temporarily freezing any sale or transfer of the storefront until the hearing. Then I went back to the local records office to double-check all filings. That's where I found something new. A document had been quietly submitted, an amendment to the cabin title, supposedly dated 2 years ago, removing my name entirely. The problem? The date on the document didn't match the notary's stamp. It had been backdated. The clerk flagged it immediately. That triggered a review by the office, and within 72 hours, a full hearing was scheduled. One for the cabin, and one for the commercial building, back to back. Miles thought he could scare me into backing off, but every threat just gave me more evidence. And now, everything he tried to hide was about to go on record. The hearing for the cabin title took place in a small county courtroom, and Miles didn't show. His lawyer did, alone and late. He carried a folder with barely anything in it and looked like he hadn't even read the case file. The judge asked about the 2003 lease agreement. I handed over the original copy with my signature and the notarized witness statements. The judge read it, looked at the dates, and said, "This holds legal weight unless it was legally dissolved." Was it? Miles' lawyer claimed I had abandoned interest years ago. I handed over utility receipts, homemade payments, and photos showing family heirlooms in the cabin used without my permission. That was enough. The judge ruled I had equitable interest in the property and granted me co-ownership pending final review. That ruling alone meant Miles no longer had the legal right to rent out the cabin. The Airbnb listing was pulled within 48 hours. Miles' girlfriend sent me a long email. It started polite, then shifted tone halfway through and ended with her accusing me of ruining a good thing. I didn't reply. I changed the locks on the cabin again and gave a full set of keys to my lawyer, just in case. She told me not to move back in yet, best to wait until the ruling was finalized and the title fully updated. I agreed. Next came the hearing for the commercial building. My lawyer laid out everything: the remapped survey, statements from tenants, proof of property neglect, and records of unpaid taxes. She showed photos of the leak, the eviction threats, and even the text message bribe Miles had sent to a tenant. Miles showed up this time, looking disheveled. His lawyer asked for more time, citing Miles' mental stress and emotional fatigue. The judge denied it. The court allowed my constructive interest claim to proceed to full documentation. That didn't mean I owned it yet, but it gave me the legal ground to act as an interested party. Repairs could be proposed, rent discussions could begin, and I was now in the system as more than a name on paper. That same week, I met with 3 tenants at the building. We sat in the vacant cafe unit with folding chairs and a space heater. I handed out copies of draft lease agreements and introduced them to 2 contractors who could start repairs once my ownership was settled. One of the older shop owners looked at me and said, "Weren't you the girl your dad told everyone had no business sense?" I nodded. Apparently I do now. My lawyer filed a motion the next day to compel Miles to submit a full disclosure of all rental income related to the commercial building for the past 3 years. The judge approved it. He now had 10 business days to turn over records, receipts, and tenant deposits, or face financial penalties. In the hallway after the hearing, the probate specialist met us with an update from the county clerk. Due to the backdated document Miles had submitted on the cabin, a second investigation was underway. If fraud was confirmed, the full title could be handed to me outright. Before we left the courthouse, the probate specialist looked at me and said, "If you want to go after damages, you'll have more than enough grounds." I nodded. But first, I wanted to finish reclaiming what should have never been taken. The cabin was back under my name. The building was halfway there. The house? That was next. And unlike Miles, I had paperwork, witnesses, and time. The financial records Miles was forced to hand over showed over $60,000 in cabin rental income across 3 years. None of it had been reported for taxes. Not a single receipt matched what had been logged with the county. My lawyer sent the full packet to the county tax assessor's office. She added one line: suspected evasion. Immediate attention required. It was flagged the same day. A week later, Miles received an official audit request and a temporary freeze on all business-linked accounts. The Airbnb payments, the cabin rental deposits, the commercial lease transfers, everything locked until further review. At the same time, the commercial building's lender issued a notice of foreclosure. Between the missed mortgage payments, unpaid taxes, and the pending litigation, the building was marked for seizure. I submitted a direct offer to the bank, 60% of the appraised value. Included a clean business plan, new lease drafts, funding proof, and property improvement proposals. The bank approved it. Escrow opened quietly. Miles wasn't even notified until the escrow agent called for signature clearance. 2 days later, he showed up at the building and screamed at one of the tenants. She called the police. The whole thing was caught on the indoor security camera I had installed weeks ago. We submitted the footage to the court. The judge reviewed it, then finalized my constructive interest claim. Ownership was transferred to me, and the lien removals were processed. I contacted every tenant. I told them repairs were scheduled. I issued rent credits. Every single lease was signed by the end of the week. Next was the cabin. Because of the audit and pending penalties, Miles agreed, through the court, to sell his remaining interest back to me at a reduced rate. It was finalized in 3 days. I took full ownership. His girlfriend tried to file a personal property claim for a few items left inside. I had photos, receipts, and timestamps proving they belonged to my family. The judge tossed her claim out in under 10 minutes. And the family house? The one my dad left to Miles as a reward for taking care of him? Miles had used it as collateral to pay off legal bills. It defaulted. The bank foreclosed. I watched it go up for public auction and didn't bid a single dollar. A month later, a cousin passed along a message from Miles. He wanted to know if I'd help him get back on his feet. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the storefront, alone. The paint was fresh, the shelves rebuilt. The name on the lease was mine. I locked the door behind me, looked around the quiet space, and said aloud, "You didn't leave me anything, Dad." So I built it back, brick by brick, and now it's mine.